So has everybody heard of CRISPR?
Gene editing. It's a topic you may have heard about.
So I'm sorry, what's CRISPR again?
Allows scientists to make precise changes to the DNA in any cell or organism.
I've heard it compared to essentially like a film editor, slicing a bit of film.
I would say that's a great analogy.
The CRISPR-Cas9 complex is made up of a guide RNA and the Cas9 protein. The RNA finds the gene target and tells the Cas9 where to cut. By changing the guide RNA, scientists can target any gene. A gene can be turned off, corrected, or an entirely new gene altogether can be inserted. But is it not too perfect to be true? This technology could be used to eradicate many genetic conditions. Cystic fibrosis, achondroplasia dwarfism, or sickle cell anemia could be cured by just one dose. But who is to say what genetic conditions are desirable or undesirable? The idea of taking control over evolution is not new. The desire to play God has a dark and troubled past. The scientific field of eugenics led to atrocities such as sterilization programs in the United States and Nazi experiments. The father of eugenics, Francis Galton, established the Laboratory for National Eugenics at UCL. He believed that humans can be improved, the same way farmers enhance crops by selectively breeding desirable traits. In this way, he sought to engineer the gene pool. Editing humans may seem like a faraway dystopian future, but already the first CRISPR-Cas9 babies have been born in China. CRISPR-Cas9 technology is cheap and efficient to use. For only $159.99, you can order your own DIY genome editing kit online. It seems inevitable that edited humans are a not-so-distant future, so it is imperative that we discuss its implications now.
My name is Eve Rogers.
I'm Gabriele Lignani.
Hey, my name's Annie Etuk.
Hi, I'm Zohar.
CRISPR-Cas9 is really advantageous in this field because not only is it extremely effective at editing genes, but it also allows for really high target site specificity. You can really design your CRISPR guides to target a very specific site in the DNA and only edit the little bits of DNA that you want to be edited.
Even though targeting DNA in this way is quite efficient, it's not completely immune to errors, and these approaches may create what we call off-target effects. So, for example, CRISPR guide RNA recognizes and binds to a DNA target sequence that's roughly 20 base pairs in length. But even if there are small differences in the target sequence, binding may still occur. This binding process can tolerate a few mismatches. This means that there are potentially thousands of possible binding sites in the genome, and it's a major safety concern that we may induce non-specific or unintended modifications because of this.
Yeah, so I think one of the issues when a lot of prominent scientists are talking about this is they talk about this glorious future where there will be no more disease, which ignores the basic fact that it simply isn't safe to change a gene before a person has reached some level of developmental maturity. For example, most genes have some pleiotropic effects. That means that they affect multiple systems or they have multiple functions. The same gene can be doing something very different in the embryo to a child and then to in an adult. We don't even know all of the pleiotropic effects of many of the genes that we're considering working on. We don't know what we could be doing to people along the course of their development and therefore to their children and grandchildren. A lot of these scientists are so in love with the idea of getting rid of disabled people that they aren't paying attention to the basic science that isn't there.
I think that germline editing to cure diseases should be ethically approved if we know all the long-term effects, better the off-targets, and know better how it works. I don't think that they should be allowed to modify it to to design babies, as we know that people who think about that, and but also speaking about disease, the in vitro fertilization, for example, is something that can help a lot already to select a viable embryo without mutation that is leading to a disease. So I don't think that modified with CRISPR embryo at the moment will be something that is to be pushed to go forward.
I think that the scientific community needs to show that we really are listening to patients. We need to be having more public consultations with patients. We need to be having initial studies where we're looking at what do patients of this condition need? What are their main struggles in life? What are their main symptoms that they struggle with? What kinds of treatment make them feel unsafe? For example, many immunosuppressive therapies make patients worried that they are going to suffer from pneumonia and other preventable illnesses. We need to be looking at what patients want and need, and we need to be making that a public search and inviting every disabled person to speak on those.
I think that dialogue can always be improved. It's important to be open about the success of CRISPR, but also the potential pitfalls and limitations of this technology. It's important to say that we don't yet fully understand the long-term implications of infusing edited cells into patients. I think it's just important to be open and honest.
I think that can be more at the level of government and things like that I think that can improve a lot the communication to the patients and also the expectation, because sometimes a lot of patients also wrote to me that and say, you're using CRISPR, can you cure my kids and things like that, because they don't realize that we are still understanding how it works, and the media obviously is like, we cure all the diseases with one new CRISPR tools, but they don't understand that it's still in progress and we are still understanding for the safety also of the patients how it works and what we can do with it.
In mainstream news, for example, our research has to be summarised into a headline, and it's an attention-grabbing headline, and it starts with all the positives, and then it's followed at the end by a disclaimer that mentions the limitations or the negative aspects, and then you get like a CRISPR film starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, which is really fun, but it's really far-fetched as well.
I mean, this is a more general problem in science, that there's so much pressure to publish and to show that your work is the most exciting new thing on the block, that you can gloss over all the potential issues with what you're doing. The more structural way that I would want us to prevent that is to put less of a pressure on publish or perish. And when we can create a more scientifically literate conversation around this, then we will probably be seeing that people do not abuse the technology because they understand the real power and the real danger that it holds.
I think we should take control of our own evolution, but there's always that cautionary note there that we have to consider the ethical and moral implications of doing so.
I think it is our responsibility to try and improve these conditions if we have the technology available to do so. However, I do think it is really difficult with technologies such as CRISPR-Cas9 as to where the line gets drawn. So, for example, the development of designer babies, which was a concern as soon as CRISPR came through, I think this surely should be really regulated. But it's really difficult to see how that line is drawn, who draws it, and to what extent. When does something become a debilitating enough condition to be gene edited, and when does it not?
Ultimately, medicine is about making people live longer, happier lives. If we're not listening to what's going to make patients happier, we're not actually achieving that aim. I feel proud of being disabled. I appreciate the perspectives that my neurodivergence and my autoimmune illness have given me. I would like to get my autoimmune illness treated, but I don't think my neurodivergence should be removed from the world. Neurodivergent people have done things like making the internet. I think we're very important, and I don't think all forms of disability or all symptoms of disability should be removed from the world.